State of California legislature has elected to cut the CSU budget by almost $1 billion over the last 18 months. And the Board of Trustees voted to raise student fees and tuition to offset a bit the reduction in state funding. Even with the tuition increases, however, that covers only a portion of the budget that was cut. So we're still in a bind relative to state funding and support for higher education in California.
CSU Board of Trustees!
CSU Board of Trustees!
Chancellor Reed! And the Government of California! Hear us! Follow the banner! Whose university?
Our university!
Whose university?
Our university!
Whose university?
Our university! Our university! Our university! Our university!
We don't want to fight amongst other universities, though. That's another. We don't want to be like CSU is better than UC, so fund us. Because it's all related. Because all of us are facing cuts. So it's really emphasizing the importance of public education in general.
I think something that really gets to me is education is meant to be an indicator of a person's success. But education isn't affordable nowadays. It isn't accessible nowadays. What about even the faculty that are being underpaid? What about our classes getting cut? Education is not being what I want it to be right now.
So the question is about the quality of education and why is the quality of education going down? And I would suggest that on this campus we have worked very hard not to decrease the quality of the education for our students. So when students talk about fewer classes, we've in fact increased the numbers of classes that we've offered in the last year. We have added faculty. We have added new academic programs. So we're in a bit of a different position. Our class size average is still under 30 students. Are there challenges to maintaining quality? Absolutely. That's the challenge, is to maintain the quality of education that students are getting in spite of these ridiculous, extreme budget reductions that the state has given to us. And we have done that, tried to maintain quality by reducing in virtually every other area of the campus.
That's all a scam. Don't go to college. Your degree's worth nothing. You become a debt slave, and it's a whole scam. And you're not going to really learn anything. You have better luck learning something by trying to work yourself up from something else, like in an actual industry.
Managing this level of budget cuts has been quite the challenge, but we have been dealing with this and planning for the various budget cuts and reductions for the last several years, probably at least 3. We've done a number of administrative reorganizations. I have reduced top-level administrators and consolidated different units together. We are working on both internal to the campus synergies or projects that involved working in different ways than we did in the past that save money. Quite frankly, we are doing things that 5 years ago we would never have considered because we weren't under extreme pressures. And one example of that is at this point, CSU Monterey Bay shares our Chief Information Officer with San Jose State. So that is a kind of synergy and savings that we can use.
But at the same time, they build it up you need to go to school, but then when you go and apply, you can't afford to go. So you're saying, yeah, I need education, but I can't afford it. So it's you tell me you need it, but you're not giving it to me. So it kind of sets you up for failure in a way.
We're really looking at every possible action or step that we can take to reduce costs. We are working to increase, for example, we have probably one of the smallest numbers of international students on our campus and out-of-state students, so we have some room to add international students, which would help our diversity on campus, but also would help us with our bottom line.
You can never go bankrupt to get out of your student loans. It's the one type of debt that you cannot free yourself from. And that's not a coincidence.
I think with respect to underrepresented students or minority students, because that is part of the mission of this campus as well as the CSU to provide access, we go the extra mile in our recruitment and outreach efforts to make sure that minority students are informed about what it takes to apply, what it takes to be admitted to Monterey Bay or to the CSU. I think that obviously middle class students have probably suffered, if you will, most of all because they fall in that crevice between being eligible for financial aid sufficient that would help them absorb the tuition increases, and yet their income isn't so high that it doesn't matter to them to have a tuition increase. Of course it matters to those who are in the middle class, and they are increasingly being squeezed. And so there are efforts afoot to take into account raising, for example, the level of income that students or their families would have that would help them qualify for different types of financial aid. The federal government recognized this when they provided the tax benefits to parents who make $150,000 or less, and they have taken advantage of that as tax credits. But in terms of money in the pocket, I think that middle class students are definitely at a disadvantage in this environment. The question had to do with how is it that either I, as a president of this campus, or presidents of the other campuses can quote, go along with the CSU trustees and the policies that the trustees enact. Well, the fact of the matter is that we are a part of the CSU system, and we are required to go along with the policies that they enact. And one example that was raised in the question, I believe, had to do with the Early Start program, and we will start that initiative this summer. And that was a direct initiative from the Board of Trustees to each of the campuses, and there has been a lot of discussion and some controversy, no question about it. But in fact, Early Start was designed to help students who need remediation to do so in the summer before they start their first fall semester as a freshman, so that when they start that first fall semester as a freshman, more of those students can begin to take courses that will help them graduate, that will be for credit. The remedial courses are not going to help them graduate because it doesn't count toward graduation. So if we can get students in earlier, do a quicker, better job of getting them through the remedial courses that they need, in fact, that may help them graduate sooner. The overall costs will be lower to them and to their families, and they will be more in step or in tune with their cohort of students who did not need remediation. So it's actually a program directed toward enhancing student success. That's a difficult question, the worst case scenario, because we have to constantly ask ourselves, what is the worst case scenario and how do we deal with it? And I think for students, obviously the worst case scenario is really two things. One is that tuition would continue to go up, and number two, and probably most damaging of all in some ways, is that access will be reduced. So that instead of being able to admit as many students as we would like or for whom we have capacity, we would simply have to deny increasingly larger numbers of students who are qualified admission to the university. And that, I think, is the absolute worst case scenario. If the state lawmakers or the governor decides that there are other alternatives besides cutting our budgets, if they would provide us with, for example, a little more autonomy that we could use and manage our funds without so much interference, we might be able to come up with some scenarios that wouldn't involve those worst cases. But right now, we're under what I consider to be almost the worst of all situations, which is they are cutting our budget severely, dramatically, drastically, and yet they want to have more and more control over how we manage it.
We are organizing all across the state. There's students for quality education chapters at like 16 CSUs, so we are organizing across the state. So that just shows one example, is like these days of action is something that we need to keep doing. And then the idea is like, how can we, grow this? How can we get more people involved? And then what else can we do on top of that? And that's, I think Santa Cruz has it down. I mean, they shut down their campus. When you do that, you show the people in power, like, without us, you have nothing. We have all the power if we organize.
Show me what